Yo, it's Queenzflip. Listen, man, I'm here to bring you a new series. And I've been doing a lot of research and I've been working on this series. I mean, it just came to me recently. I ain't gonna lie to you, because sometimes we try to make it seem like we're doing something so great. Under this quarantine, I decided to do a series called G.O.A.T. And not greatest of all time, no. Gangsters of all time. And each time in the series, I will bring you a gangster in New York, some known, some not known, and I will give you their story from what I researched, what I've looked into, what I've actually tried to study. You know what I mean? And it's a headache, being under quarantine, but I try my best. I'm gonna tell you the stories, how I'm gonna tell it, and hopefully you enjoy it. So this is GOAT, and welcome to the Quiet Room. The first episode I'm gonna give you is a lady who don't really need an introduction. No introduction. She doesn't need it. She doesn't need it. Harlem. In the building. Harlem. Are you in the building? Madame Queen. Madame. The queen of policies. Miss Queenie. Today I'm going to give you Stephanie Queenie St. Clair. Stephanie St. Clair was born December 24th, 1897 in Guadeloupe, according to records. And while in Guadeloupe, at the age of 15, she had to drop out of school to take care of mom. You got to take care of Mama Love when she gets sick. Her mother fell ill, and she had to take care of Mama Love. Salute to that. And while out of school, she got a job as a maid for a rich family. And while working for this rich family, she was repeatedly raped by their son, Sicko. He lucky she wasn't the real Sinclair. She'd knock him in the sandbox. But, she was by it, sick, things like that. And when she was taken advantage of, she had to put up with that in order to take care of her mother. After her mother passed away, she raised up enough money to migrate to New York. And when she migrated to New York, she met a guy named Duke. Now, Duke was a small-time hustler, probably pickpocket. With a name like Duke, we don't know what work he put in. No disrespect to Duke's family if you hear this. But apparently, she fell in love with a guy named Duke. She came out here fresh off the boat. She met him, fell in love with Duke. Now, Duke, being the small-time crook that he is, tried to do the old-school maneuver and try to get her to be a prostitute. And we know those old-school doings. We old-school, these stories was written long time ago. You're trying to get money. A lot of things, they're working, hustling, they working. And back in those days, Italians running around. You're trying to find your way, and you got a bad joint. So he tried to put her on the strip. And by trying to put her on the strip, it didn't work. She wasn't with it. He tried to force her. He was aggressive. So she stabbed him in the eye with a fork. And rightfully so. You know what I mean? And his hand wasn't strong. His pimp hand wasn't strong, but she stabbed him in the eye. And when she stabbed him in the eye, she started to flee, proceeded to flee because she stabbed him, and he was after her. And when she was fleeing, the bus that she was on was stopped by the Ku Klux Klan. And when it was stopped by the KKK, apparently a lot of the people on the bus, a lot of black people were hung and were murdered. And she was raped repeatedly. And after that ordeal, or after that tragedy, she went back to New York. She came back to New York and met a guy named Ed. And she fell in love with Ed as well. I don't know if she really fell in love with Ed, but she met a guy named Ed. Now, Ed was a little bit more higher than Duke. Not as high, not too much higher, but Ed knew how to get money. Ed had to work on the block. Ed knew how to move the pieces. So she got with Ed, and she started to get money with Ed. And then, she got some money up, and then she decided when she hit 30 racks that, Ed, I don't need you no more. Probably Ed wasn't, I don't know what Ed was doing, but Ed wasn't good enough. Because Madam Sinclair, she saw more for herself. So she told Ed, listen, man, I don't want to do this no more with you. I'm going to start my own joint. And I have to respect her for that. You got to respect a woman that steps up to the plate who has the gall to tell a man, I don't want to work with you no more. So she told him that, and he tried to strangle her. on some old school stuff. He tried to wild on her. She wasn't going with it. So after he tried to strangle her, she pushed him. Boop. He fell, hit his head. Gaga down. Cracked his skull. He passed away. A couple of months later, it's like April 12th, 1917, she invested $10K of her own money into a lottery game, aka numbers. Now, what's numbers? Numbers is when bettors, actually, numbers is illegal gambling, illegal lottery. But numbers is when bettors pick 3 numbers that will be randomly picked the next day. So, you can picture it. But when she invested in that, she had a come up. She made a come up. She had about 20 controllers, 40 runners, and she was able to make $250,000 annually. So she never looked back after that $10K she invested. A Harlem come up. Never looked back. She became the richest black woman of her time in America. She became that. So she had $250,000 annually. She never looked back. Now, moving forward, this stuff brings a lot of attention. She's moving and shaking. She's a woman. It brings a lot of attention to her. And then one day in 1922, if I remember correctly, she was walking and the police started to bother her. And the police suggested that she goes to the 123rd precinct, or the precinct on 120, or the station down on 123rd Street. And when she went down there, the lieutenant advised her, gave her advice and said and explained to her how things work in Harlem. A lot of the police back in the days were crooked. Back then they were crooked. And, she gave in. She gave in and she began to pay him off $300. And every time she paid him off, they would call her. And even though she didn't like it, she had to pay him off. She had to comply. And even though she complied, they were still harassing her workers. Because sometimes when you pay off, they're supposed to leave your workers alone. That's supposed to be the deal. But those crooked cops, they want more, man. You give somebody an inch, they take a mile. So she paid him off $300, sometimes $500, $6,000 in all. And while paying them off, they still bother her workers. So she got fed up and she started to stand up for herself. But one day, somebody broke into her house and they cut their hand on the glass and they broke through the window and they stole $500 from her. And when they stole the $500, she got fed up. And what she did, she called the lieutenant and they ignored her. So after they ignored her, she turned up on them. She took ads in the paper, in the Amsterdam paper. She took ads. She was blasting them, blowing them up. Crooked police, blowing them up because they didn't keep their end of the deal when it came to her. They wasn't honorable when it came to her. So she took ads in the paper, the Amsterdam paper, and started blowing them up. And that put another target on her back. After the advertisement, she wrote the mayor, she wrote the president, but nobody helped her. She called the lieutenant. I got fingerprints, but when you give those dirty cops an inch, they take a mile. Like I said earlier. She said, I got fingerprints, case closed. They ain't pay her no attention, so she stopped paying. She's not going to succumb. She was a gangster. I'm not succumbing to that. I paid to leave my workers alone. You're still messing with my workers. And on top of that, you're not honoring our deal. So she turned up on them. Turned up. So one day she's taking a bus and the bus stops at 177 141st Street. And she felt somebody following her. So when she get off the bus, 3 policemen, they lock her up and they accuse her of having policy slips. So they locked up and she said she was framed. She was making noise in the street. They framing me. She was making noise, and talking to the people who would listen. They're framing me because she didn't have no policy slips on her, but they framed her. And by framing her, she was sentenced to 2 years and she had to do 8 months out of the 2 years. And out of the 8 months, where did she go to? Welfare Island. She went to Welfare Island to do 8 months out of the 2 years. And when she came home, she vowed like a gangster does to fight this to the end. And that's what she did. And that was in 1930. And you can say, yo, Flip, what's Welfare Island? Well, Welfare Island is also known as Roosevelt Island. It's a little island between Manhattan and Queens. And it's a little island. And the island was there. They had the sick. They had criminals there. They had the mentally ill there. It was a lot of stuff, on that island. And she was there doing hard labor on Welfare Island in the workshop. And She was there, like I said, 8 months out of the 2 years. After that, in 1931, the Seabury Commission launched an investigation against the New York City politics and New York City corruption. And what's the Seabury Commission? Seabury Commission is named after some white dude named Samuel Seabury, who was a politician, a lawyer, then a judge. So he dedicated his life to taking out corruption in New York City. So they had the Seabury Commission. He's a judge. He put Madam Sinclair on the stand. And when he put on the stand, Madam Sinclair blew the whistle. Blew it. Judges, crooked cops, everybody got him up out of there. And her testimony, her proof, her testimony was so strong that she was able to get the lieutenant out of there. She was able to get judges fired. She was able to do a lot of stuff by her testimony, and she warned everybody to leave her alone. But by her doing that, by her explaining, because she had to explain what she did and what they were doing, she put a target on her back. She had the government look into it more. Catch-22. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Is it a catch-22? Help me if it's not a catch-22. But what I'm saying is that by her exposing these crooked people, she told them what she did and had them look into it more, because she paid in extortion fees about $6,000, to the lieutenant and stuff like that. And so they looked into it. Now, moving forward, the Jewish and Italian crime families saw a decrease in what they were doing. So they wanted to come to Harlem. And black people, we do it best. They always try to come bite us. No disrespect to the whites. Salute. It's the facts. So they came in and tried to get us. And one guy in particular, the Dutchman, Dutch Schultz. Now, Dutch Schultz is a rough guy. He's a killer. He's all these things. He will do what he has to do in order to get what he wants. He looked real raggedy, they said. And they said he was cheap with his money, but he made money. And he would go to stores and he would force people to pay him for his protection so he could protect them. And Madam Sinclair wasn't going for it. No, sir. Her name is Dr. Evil. She's trying to find a reason why. She's not going for that. She's from Harlem. You thought you was going to come in here and try to... No. And she had Bumpy Johnson on her side. And we're going to get into Bumpy Johnson another time. This is not about him. You know what I mean? So, but of course, Bumpy Johnson is her lieutenant. So Dutch Schultz was a serious guy, man. He didn't play. And Madam Queen or Queenie or Miss Sinclair, she wasn't going for it. She wasn't having him come in and take over her empire or have him come in. But, he had the power of the mob behind him. He was powerful. So he had a lot of people scared. But she took it upon herself, her and Bumpy Johnson, to go in there and break things up and go into the stores that he was in and break things up and rip policies up and do a lot of stuff that she did to show that she's not backing down. And as a black woman, you got to commend that. You know what I mean? It became so bad, that Dutch ended up putting the price on her head. He put the bag on her. But before we get to the bag he put on her head and how close to death she came, let's talk about the fact that he tried to cut the runners out. He wanted to cut the runners out so people could go to a storefront and get the numbers. And what happened was Miss Sinclair put that in the ad. She put it in the ad like, listen, man, he's taken from our community. And by doing that, he thought that the people in Harlem would feel good, but they picket sign and he thought the betters would feel good, but no, they not playing. You can't come in our community and play around. They forced his hand. They picket and they rallied and stuff like that. And he hired back the runners because he tried to do the old school Italian mob trick, but he's not Italian, but the old school, I'm gonna cut it out. Always try to find a cheap way. You can't find no cheap way. You got to pay, homie. You got to pay, Mr. Schultz. And that's what she said. So anyway, she bashed the store, bashed the things and stuff like that. It got so bad with her pressure and applying pressure. She applied pressure so much that he put a hit on her head. Now, I don't know the price. I didn't research the price. I did research, but I can't find the price. But he put a hit out on her head, and things became so bad, so close to death, that she had to hide into a coal cellar, C-O-A-L, a coal cellar. She had to hide under coal. You know what I mean? That's how bad things came. And then one time, Dutch sent somebody to her home, 409 Edgecombe, and apparently she pushed the guy in a closet and locked him in there. I don't know what closets they had in Harlem. I don't know what closet he can get out. I think that she violated. I think that she hurt him, to be honest, because she already knocked a couple of people off. Allegedly. I think she hurt him. Locked him in the closet. So after she put him in the closet, you know, man, I think she knocked him off. And according to the doorman or the janitor or somebody in the building, they let in 4 guys upstairs to Miss Sinclair's apartment. And 20 minutes later, they came out. And the rumor has it that they went upstairs to handle the business or get rid of the body. That's the rumor. That's in the stories. And it was one of Dutch Schultz's peoples. It was one of his men that he sent over there to holler at her. And she was just lucky, man. She got away with a lot of stuff. She was very powerful. She was witty. She knew how to run the streets, and she knew her way around putting work in. So she was protected. We can see she's protected. But at the end of the day, Dutch Schultz and the mob was, you know, he had a lot of people. He had Lucky Luciano. He had these people behind him. So, you know, they were applying pressure. And after a while, you know, according to documents, Miss Sinclair handed it to Bumpy Johnson, handed her number game to Bumpy Johnson. And when she handed it to him, you know, he ended up taking it to wherever he took it at. And we're going to get into him in another episode. So then she fell back. You know, she wanted to fall back and she wanted to stay away from the police. And, you know, Dutch Schultz, you know, he had Lucky Luciano behind him. He had the, you know, the mob behind him, basically, plus his own movement. And even though, you know, he was able to sort of become victorious, because he wasn't really victorious because she didn't give in to him. But the pressure from him, you know, allowed the others around the vicinity to succumb to his rules and what he felt. But it brought a lot of attention anyway from a U.S. attorney or district attorney named Thomas Huey. Now, Thomas Huey, you know, brought him up on charges and tried to charge him, but, you know, Dutch Schultz was acquitted. He was acquitted, but he wanted to assassinate Mr. Dewey. He wanted to assassinate him. I don't know. He couldn't just be acquitted and go. You know, he's one of those hothead. You know, those like, it's like kicking somebody when they down. Like, they hurt already, man. Or that's like you about to get jumped and you got away. I got away. Oh, got away free. And then you want to go back and punch the guy that set you up. Like, you got away and you end up getting hurt. Anyway, they told him not to. He was persistent. He wanted to do it. And then they put a hit on him. So when they put a hit on him, and they decided for him to go. So Dutch Schultz ended up being in a coma. You know, he gets shot. He ended up in a coma. But before he dies, or before he goes into a coma, she sends a telegram. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And that was a powerful statement from a black woman. That made headlines all over. And so, you know, he passes away. So she falls back, you know, and then, you know, she falls back from that. Still wealthy, still got money, and she married a guy named Sufi Abdul Hamid. Now, this guy, Sufi Abdul Hamid, you know, he was like a black Hitler. Like, he wanted the people in Harlem to run the Jews out of town, you know, and, you know, they started to ride with him when he was like, he wanted them to advocate, or he wanted them to cause an uproar in the community because they weren't hiring any African-American people. But when he said run the Jews out of town, and he was openly against the Jews, Harlem wasn't having it. Now, Harlem, say what you want about Harlem, but Harlem is money getters. They make everything work. They're not savages. They're about getting that money, but they're not savages. Put some respect on their name. So, by him doing that, they stopped rocking with him. But he ended up having a side chick named Futam, who was a spiritual leader, or a spiritualist, or a tarot card reader, or whatever you want to call it. And him and his side chick, Futam, tried to open up a business with Miss Sinclair money. Now, you can't do that. Huh? You can't do that. Not with Miss Sinclair money. So she clapped him. Bang! Then she shot at him 3 times. Bang! 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 But she clapped, I think one hit him, but they're saying that he got hit, or this article saying he didn't get hit, but she ended up doing 5 to 10 years. She ended up doing 10 years. She ended up getting sentenced to 10 years, and they said she did 5. It's a lot of different people say she did 3. People saying she did 5. Anyway, she did time. She did time for shooting him, and when she came back home, you know what I mean, he ends up dying, in a plane crash. She came home and, you know, she still was advocating for the people in the community. She was writing about, you know, mistreatment, injustice towards the black people, injustice in the work area. A lot of things she was advocating for, and she was using her money to put in these articles, and she stood on her square and passed away in 1969 at the age of 73. Still wealthy, still getting money. She passed away. But before I end this, let me put some respect on Miss Sinclair name myself. She was a militant black nationalist. She told the Haitian Americans to stand up for themselves. I'm Haitian American, so I feel that. She opened up the French Aid Society. You know, she tried to get people to register to vote so they could get the corruption out of town. So she was for the people. I mean, you know, of course she's a hustler. She got to get it how we get it. But we can't say all the negatives and not the positives. You know what I'm saying? I mean, running numbers, and I just felt she had a come up, so it's not really a negative. You know, but at the same time, you have to put respect on her name. As a woman, she was fighting for the rights. She was out here putting on, man. And a lot of these movies, they display her character to be false, like a hoodlum. They try to make it seem like she's weak. She wasn't weak. She wasn't scared of nothing, man. You know what I mean? And shout out to Bumpy Johnson. He ended up being her protection to the day she passed away. He passed away before her. She died 18 months later. You know what I'm saying? But he protected her. You understand what I'm saying? So my main thing is that we got to put respect on her name. She was for the people. So this is the first episode of GOAT, Gangsters of All Time. Tell me what you think. Comment below. Let's see who I put up next. And it'll be better. You know, the first try is a little crazy. I'm from Queens.